Let's take a look at how we use role-based access control to govern access to resources in Active Directory. Now, this is a pretty simple scenario, and in fact, role-based access control is a pretty simple concept. It's not something that's terribly complicated or difficult to do. So to begin, you can do role-based access control at a number of different levels. You can do it on individual objects, you can do it on subscriptions, or in our example here, we're going to govern a resource group. So I have one resource group, Contoso Blue AD, that's got some objects in it, and I want to grant certain users the ability to manipulate some of these objects. Now this is done using the access control properties for that particular resource group. And so what that will show me is a list of all the users and the individual roles that they have within the group or within the resource group. So you can see I've got one listed as an owner, and I've got one user listed as a virtual machine contributor. So what is a virtual machine contributor? Well, it's a built-in Azure role that grants you certain permissions. If I highlight the little icon here, it kind of gives you, you can manage virtual machines and how to access them or the network or storage accounts they're connected to. And so if I click on this, it'll give you some information on the role, and I can actually drill down and see exactly what tasks and properties this role allows me to see. So you can see you can get very granular with all these roles in terms of knowing what it is you're allowed to do. You can see you can read, write, delete, and if there's other actions, it doesn't list specifically what the other actions are because it's kind of a generic view. Assigning users to roles is simply a matter of clicking Add and then choosing the role and choosing the user. Here's a list of all the built-in user roles that are available to me. So I'm going to pick a let's pick a user access administrator just as an example. I can assign this to an individual virtual machine, or I can assign it to an AD user group or application. And in my case, I'm going to assign this to a user. I'm just going to pick a random user, click Save, and that user has now been assigned that role. I can click on User Access Administrator to learn more about what individual permissions this role has. Now there's more broad descriptions, again, if you click the little icon here, or you can also go out on the Azure documentation. There's some pretty good description of what all the built-in roles are and the individual permissions they have. Removing it is simply a matter of clicking Remove. And that will revoke that user's permissions via that role. If I click on roles, we can see what the roles are, and then it tells me how many users or groups have actually been assigned that role. And I can click on it and see what those users are. So you can always go this way to see, you know, if you've got a particular role, who's been given that role, and then again further drill into the individual permissions. So it's really that simple to assign users to built-in roles and to remove those corresponding role assignments. But what if you want to build a custom role? Well, that's a little more complicated, but it's also somewhat straightforward to do. Custom roles are done via PowerShell, and they're actually written in JSON. So let's go ahead and take a look at one so you can get a sense of what these look like. So here's an example of a custom role definition. This one's called Virtual Machine Operator. It's got a description, and then these are the individual actions that are allowed. So for example, we can read, storage, compute, and networking. We can start and restart virtual machines, and as well as read some other basic information. So this is the part that requires a little more knowledge. You've got to understand what the individual supported actions are within Azure, and then incorporate those actions into your custom role definition. The assignable scope governs where this particular custom role is applied. So for example, here, when this custom role is created, it's applied to an individual resource group. It's a resource group called Contoso Blue in a subscription. I got the GUID of the subscription. So that's the only place this custom role would be available. So you can choose to do this at a subscription level or at an individual resource group level. But it becomes pretty simple once you determine what the actions are. And you can look at, you know, existing roles. There's also good documentation on this to figure out what are the scope of actions that you need to include in a custom role. Once you've defined your custom role, it's a pretty simple process to configure it, or rather install it within Active Directory. And to do that, there's a PowerShell commandlet new Azure RM role definition. You supply the input file, and that will upload that role definition into Azure Active Directory, and you'll become available for you to use within in this case, within the Contoso Blue resource group. So let's sort of look at using Azure roles and assigning users and removing users from the built-in Azure roles using role-based access control.